Thanks for joining me. Tonight, what's the difference between the legal rights for married and de facto couples, including those in same-sex relationships?
Greg's got an older super scheme. We didn't really realize the depth of documentation that's required because we don't have a civil marriage certificate.
So this is Mel's death certificate, and that's where Mel's ex-husband's name is put on. It makes me feel like our relationship really worth nothing.
There are very significant differences between the legal rights you get being a married couple, the legal rights being a de facto couple.
All right, we're going to rest for 2 minutes. Ready?
Almost all of those children believe that dental pain was just normal.
And putting the smiles back into remote communities.
You fly in on Monday, then you have the dentist finished by Thursday.
No, it's all right. Feels good. Where's the station?
If you're in a de facto relationship, do you have the same rights as if you were married? In the same-sex marriage debate, the no side argues the law doesn't discriminate against same-sex couples. But those in the yes camp have a different view, arguing that some same-sex couples face financial uncertainty and unequal treatment because they're not allowed to marry. Julia Holman's gone to speak to some legal experts so we can get to the truth of the matter.
Jo and Greg have been dance partners for just a couple of years.
I have Parkinson's disease. It was diagnosed in 2011.
The only thing that has any real data that was shown to be effective in even potentially slowing the course of the disease is exercise. Certain types of exercises had been pointed out, dancing being one of them.
They've been life partners for 14 years, and Greg's illness means it's now time to get their affairs in order.
It causes you to just stop and rethink things a lot.
We didn't really realize the depth of documentation that's required because we don't have a civil marriage certificate. It was just appalling how many things were different.
Greg realised that his superannuation benefit isn't guaranteed to go to Jo because they're not married under Australian law.
Greg's got an older super scheme that doesn't accept binding nominations, and instead there's a hugely onerous burden of proof.
They went to see a financial planner, but the advice they got was not what they expected.
She made a comment that it's a shame people had to go overseas to get married. Greg asked her if she thought that would make a difference to our circumstance here, and she said it was very compelling evidence. So it was kind of sad that we planned our wedding so that we would have compelling evidence. This was your favorite picture here, wasn't it?
Times Square.
Jo and Greg went to New York and got married, but there's still no guarantee it will resolve their problems with Greg's superannuation fund, and there'll be no decision until Greg dies.
And here we are at Town Hall for the big event.
New York City Hall.
This is our celebrant. It's very hard for us in this debate to hear people coming out and saying, well, why do you have to call it marriage when you have all of exactly the same rights every way? And this is just flat out not true. We do not. We have a lot of extra hoops that we have to jump through.
There are very significant differences between the legal rights you get being a married couple, the legal rights being a de facto couple. And the main thing is that marriage is a set of promises, and once you've made those promises and you've entered into that legal status, that's it. That's you don't have to prove that relationship over and over.
I met Mel at a barbecue in Altona, and yeah, just went from there. We both had a love for riding motorbikes.
Tony Irene Broon met her partner Mel more than 2 decades ago. They dreamed that one day they'd get married.
She got down on her knees and said, well, she said, will you marry me? And we knew that we couldn't do it at the time, but we had a commitment ceremony.
But the opportunity to marry would never come.
It was the beginning of June last year. I woke up to hear her screaming and she was having a seizure in her sleep. And yeah, just went from there. She was taken to the hospital and diagnosed with a brain tumour. She went downhill very quickly. I came home from work one afternoon. She just wasn't my Mel. And yeah, a week or so later she was gone.
Mel died just 3 months after she was diagnosed. As hard as it was to lose her partner of 21 years, Tony wasn't prepared for what happened next.
After Mel passed away, when we were doing all the stuff at the funeral place, the guy asked me about the death certificate and I said to him, does my name go on the death certificate?
The answer was no.
It says relationships, and that's where Mel's ex-husband's name is put on because they were married, but they had been divorced, I think, for about 20 years, and then Mel's daughter, and then parents, and then my name gets put on down the bottom as the informant. To me, it makes me feel like our relationship was really worth nothing and that we were invisible. I was invisible. I don't want that to happen to anyone else.
Well, you know, you've lost your partner, you're in these throes of grief, and I mean, one of the things that can hurt a lot through that grief process is if your relationship with the person who's died is not recognised.
We want the same things that other people have, access to the same rights that anyone else has.
Those arguing for marriage equality say that same-sex couples are still legally discriminated against in many areas.
You've got different definitions of de facto in every state and territory. You've got different definitions of de facto or domestic partnership or domestic relationship for different pieces of legislation. And so the goalposts shift depending on what you're trying to do.
I believe that the playing field is now level, effectively.
Barrister Christopher Breuer from the No Camp says that the law doesn't favour married couples over de facto couples.
Well, starting from 2005, there were changes to Commonwealth legislation, and then the big ticket items happened in 2008. The big change to superannuation, for example. And that effectively created a level playing field. And you can look at then end-of-life issues, and there are stock standard provisions which everybody can and probably should access. Will, advanced care directive, enduring power of attorney, enduring power of guardianship, or similar provisions. And that takes care of the issues of next of kin and concerns about who has the right to speak, etc.
I mean, I see this bandied about this idea, oh, well, you're already equal. And, you know, technically in many areas there is that technical equality, but when it comes to actually accessing your rights, that's not necessarily the case.
Jo and Greg continue to practice and perform their dance moves. They're hoping it will come in handy if they're allowed to get married in Australia.
We just want to be able to have a civil marriage certificate and know that our affairs are the same as everybody else's. That's what we want.